Systematic Scale and Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching Scaling with What You Have, How to Build Your Org When You Are Bootstrapped. I am super excited to introduce our speaker today. And as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question today. What would you like to scale in your personal life? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maranda Dekonsky, SVP of Customer Success and Ops at Data Assembly. She was previously a CS executive at Swiftly, Paired, and HelloSign. Thanks for joining us today, Maranda.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm super excited to be here with you all today to talk about this topic that's near and dear to my heart. Now, to answer the icebreaker question, that's a little hard for me. I've been thinking about it. One, I do wish that I could get more hours in the day while still maintaining my sleep. But I also think maybe I'd like to scale down my Diet Coke consumption. I don't know, or scale up my exercising.
Oh, yes.
That's a hard question to answer.
There's so many things. There's so many things I would like to not have to do all the time.
Yeah.
But great. Thank you so much for humoring us and answering our question. Just as a reminder to everyone who's attending, please feel free to use the chat to answer any or ask any questions, and anything that we don't get to today, we will share with Maranda, and we will follow up with the recording as well on our resource hub. But yeah, without further ado, I can go ahead and get you started.
Awesome. And hi, Greg. So nice to have you with me again. Again, thank you everybody for joining. Before we get started, I am going to just share a little bit about me. Of course, you already know I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Success and Operations over at Data Assembly. But what you may not know is I have owned more than just CS. I've also owned HR for numerous years, biz ops, finance, sales, marketing, and various other functions within startups. I tend to specialize in early to mid-stage startups. This is now my 9th startup that I'm on. I did start out earlier in my career working for about 10 years at a very large organization. So I'm talking 40 to $50 billion a year in revenue. So I've seen all sides of the equation. And those that have seen me speak before, these first couple of slides will be repeat, and then we're going to get into some new information. Very excited that I am now published in five books now. The authors of these books interviewed me to be part of their books, and I can't recommend them enough. So if you're looking for some great reads, definitely check them out. Rod Shirkus, I think he was a speaker here today or will be. He recently published Reach, which is the newest book out there about customer success frameworks and methodologies for driving revenue, which is something new that a lot of us are handling for the first time in our careers. I'm also, though, more than my resume. I'm a wife, a mom, and a fur mom. So this is just a little snapshot into my family. And if you're watching over here live, I have Muggsy and Ruby, who are also presenting at this conference with me today. So let's hop into it. So let's take a minute to talk about the state of the state. Many of us are getting extreme pressure from our board or investors to get more efficient with our spend. And in some cases, especially those still reliant on external funding to find that pathway to profitability. This is especially true if you serve the tech industry or work in the tech industry, because money is expensive, funding is tight, and the days of frivolous spending, hiring ahead, over investing in areas where we can't prove the ROI for that investment, those are long gone. We are all being challenged to do more with less or the same resources that we have. And this has been the theme for the past year or so. And if what we are seeing in our organizations isn't proof enough, what I've done is out on LinkedIn, I put out a few surveys. I think I have maybe 4 or 5 surveys that I'm just going to quickly share the results with you all on. First, I asked out on LinkedIn, in 2024, what is happening with your overall budget? I wanted to know, just to mush it all together, your tech, travel, training, hiring, anything else you had money for in 2023. And 62% of those folks have had their budgets cut overall. Now, I will admit, I see this as well, that hiring is picking up a bit this year from 2023, which is great. But we are still seeing about a 50-50 split when it comes to hiring versus folks that are either not planning to hire or still evaluating. I've personally witnessed that hiring is picking up, but the barrier for leaders to get those positions approved by finance partners has been significantly increased. So we're just being challenged to make sure we've exhausted all options before taking on that spend. The next data point I just want to quickly share, and to add to this overall story, is that churn has remained an issue for many companies or has become a bigger issue this year. More customers are looking at their bottom lines and cutting spend that either doesn't, feed their revenue machine or fall into that mission critical bucket. And then I think this is the last one. I may have one more. So here I'm going to challenge everyone on the call today, given the climate that we're currently in, to get ahead of your risks, get ahead of the reduction in forces that could still be coming down the line, get ahead of the forced budget cuts, and start to think about how you can build your org out when you are operating in a bootstrapped manner, which I think many, if not the majority of us, are right now. I promise this isn't meant to be doom and gloom presentation, but this is a reality that many of us are facing. So you may be wondering, great, Miranda, thanks for all this really happy information, happy details. Where do I start now? Well, today I'm going to touch upon these 5 areas and show you a few examples. I'm big on showing real life examples and hopefully inspire you to get to some action points that you can take today. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First one I'm going to dig into is knowing your numbers. So understanding where your organization is, where you need to be by the end of the year, or whatever measurement period you use to inform your plans is crucial. I'm going to show you an example in just a moment of an actual forecast that I built and use that really helps drive the underlying actions that I put in place to build out my org. I have this template created. You are all welcome to it. Just message me on LinkedIn and I can provide you with a copy. Once you have an understanding of where you need to be, you can use that information to help guide you on staffing needs, make assumptions on, tech tools. If you want to start dabbling in AI, which we're going to talk a little bit about later, you can use this information to help guide where that's all that's going to need to take place. On the next 3 slides, I'm going to show you what this looks like and how this actually works. So this is the first slide. And again, these are just example numbers, but this is an actual forecast that I use. You'll note what I do is I take the full year. So I do this generally in October, November for the following year, understanding where we need to be with our ARR by the end of the year, baking in a certain percentage of churn, even though we know churn doesn't happen nice and neat. Then taking a look at how much new revenue that we assume, again, we're just building a forecast, we assume that we're going to bring in. And with that, if you know your average contract value on your new logo and your upsell, you can then kind of come to a roundabout way of how many new customers or new logos you'll bring in. Then you can use this to fuel and understand approximately how many CSMs you'll need, how many folks in implementation, and if you're tracking your support numbers, to how many support reps you can have, or you may need, pardon me. So what you will notice is I have listed out here customer success managers at 1.5 million, customer success managers at 1.75, at 2, at 3. This is assuming a certain level of efficiency gains. So if you would need to fill in whatever the appropriate ranges are for your customer success managers, but you can see a significant difference in staffing needs if you have a model where you can only manage 1.5 million per CSM versus 3, you almost need double the headcount. So that's where I challenge folks to really get deep and understand what's actually needed and figure out those efficiency gains. And lastly, I'm going to go into this a little bit more as well in some future slides. But here I do something similar for customer support. And many of us own both customer success and support and likely implementations as well. But it's a similar idea of if your rep can solve 600 tickets per month versus 7 versus 750 versus 8, this will give you a little bit of a model in how to project what you'll need. All right, well, kind of moving out of the example slides, your first lever for efficiency is thinking about your overall customer journey and understanding what the minimum journey needed is in order for your customer to be successful within your product or service. One of the common mistakes I see companies make is they over-engineer the customer experience or over-service the journey, which can not only be expensive, but it's also not always necessary. Not everyone needs white glove experience, nor do they want it. But it's also important to not underservice. So it's definitely like a Goldilocks scenario where you don't want your porridge too hot, too cold. You want it just right. In the next slide, I do show an example of a real reporting created using Zendesk. And as an example of how I used to look at support tickets to help us figure out where to invest, not only in the help center content, but also, with product improvement suggestions and other levers that we had available to help us get more efficient. So here is a real life example again of straight from Zendesk. So of tracking of tickets, time to solve, figuring out what the cost per minute is, the total cost to solve, and also thinking through the levers to really deflect those tickets, but still make sure you're keeping the customer experience front and center. Some of the things I was always looking at on my levers, and I have them all listed here: training, help center, community, in-app walkthroughs and guidance, doing more of like a community support motion, automated responses. So there are some great tools out there now, and it's getting even better to where you can plug in AI to help, get those tickets solved right up front, which reduces your cost to solve. And then educational webinars, product fixes, you all get the idea. But this is another way to really hone in on areas where you can find efficiencies, low-hanging fruit, to help utilize your resources, the humans, in a different way. The next thing I'm going to talk about is assessing your team. This is especially true when you're an early stage startup. So hire folks that are willing to get their hands dirty and at times work outside of their scope of a role. This is very common in early stage. Great example early on at HelloSign. Not only was I the VP of CS and Ops, I would also clean out the refrigerator, and I helped stand up our billing and receivables system. I would build out an occasional chair. You get the idea. I love and thrive in that early stage environment. I love to build and get in there and understand things that are sometimes outside my scope. And that, especially when you're bootstrapped and trying to figure out how you're going to get to that next level, is an incredibly crucial thing to hire for. I also want to call out, at times I do see organizations push to specialize way too soon. Yes, you do get efficiencies with some functions when specializing, but in a world where resources are tight, it's important to understand when that time is. And it's also important to look at the things that you've already specialized to see if there are things that could be folded back within your org. Again, I want to be very careful of encouraging everybody just to start, moving everybody back into a generalist motion, because I am a big believer that specialization can get you efficiencies, but you have to do it at the right time and with the right function. The last thing I want to call out here, which may not be popular, but as a leader, I would be remiss if I didn't call it out, is to be open to lower cost resources. Maybe that means you bring in a contractor for a bit to bridge that gap, or you hire in low-cost regions, lower cost regions. There are oodles of fantastic talent right here if you're in the United States, all over the US. You don't necessarily need to hit New York City, San Francisco, which is the area I'm in, to get fantastic talent. There's talent all over the place, so get creative. Which leads me to my next point is get creative. There was a huge push for the last, I would say, 5 years to get digital customer success stood up. And I am all for it, but the focus was heavily centered around a certain segment of your customers. Right now, everyone in your org should be focused on how they can get more information out to many. This is a big part of bootstrapping as well. Buddy up with your marketing partners. They're experts at disseminating information across large populations. I don't think we link arms enough in customer success with our marketing partners. So really buddy up with them. Understand how they think about drip campaigns, how they think about disseminating that information, and figure out how to pull that into CS and get that motion solid. And this is just one more example slide. So I know on the last slide, I called out Help Center. So this is an example of a slide I used to present monthly at previous exec meetings that would show how our efforts to increase visibility on our help centers was reducing our overall tickets created and how it was all playing out. The key to no matter what you do is you need to measure it, create improvement goals, wash, rinse, repeat, right? So whatever it is you're going to do to create efficiencies, measure where you are now, get your baseline measurement, figure out what your levers are, measure again, and pay close attention to what's really moving the needle and what's not. And I also want to add, don't boil the ocean. Don't try to do too much, because then when you are making improvements, you might not know exactly what it was that you did that moved that needle. So you're not going to be able to double down on it. Last slide, and then we'll get to some key takeaways and any questions that folks have. And I actually can't believe I moved through this so quick. I was worried I was going to run out of time. Evaluate your tech stack. I highly suggest setting up a tech stack that doesn't require multiple full-time folks to keep it running, period. I see this happen all of the time. Companies over-tool too quickly. They bring in tools that are made for very large organizations with full-time ops folks to keep it running. And then, it doesn't work because they don't have those resources and they think the tool is garbage. It's not usually the tool. It's usually the resources we put out to stand the tool up. That's why I highly suggest bringing in tools that require minimal effort to keep it up and running from an administrative perspective. I also want to call out, I did put in a tool, and I'm not going to name which one here on this list, that is a little bit admin heavy, but there aren't a ton of great options outside of that, in my opinion, that work well in syncing with CS tools. Lastly, I want to call out, I just had a great conversation last week with a pretty prominent PE firm, and they are encouraging all of their portfolio companies to think about their AI strategy and figure out how to leverage AI. I'm seeing this more and more and more, where we're getting directives from our investors to figure out how to leverage AI. Everyone should be open to figuring it out and adopting it in our organizations. This is just going to free up our teams from doing a lot of the transactional work and allow them space to do the more strategic work. I know there's still folks out there that are a little hesitant to do so, but I just want to encourage people to take that leap and go out and start small, but start. All right, just a few key takeaways for you all here. Even when times are good, so I know I started out this presentation painting a picture of where our reality is. But even when times are good, building for efficiency is just smart. It's just a smart thing to do. Know your numbers. I've preached this for years, but knowing your numbers and the levers you have available to you to move those numbers is also just smart and necessary for folks in leadership and beyond. The next key takeaway, rethink your customer journey. Just remember, not everyone wants or needs that white glove experience. I'm one of those individuals. Even the tools that I purchase where I get a CSM, I tell them, just point me to the manual that's going to tell me how to set it up and let me roll. I'm not somebody who wants to spend time meeting with CS folks all the time. I love CS folks. They're great, but I'm busy. And that is the same for the majority of our customers. Don't do things the same way just because that's the way it's always been done. We get stuck in this rut of, not evolving and doing things the same way just because it's the way it's always been done. So I challenge folks to just get in there and figure out, are we doing things the most efficient way that would drive fantastic customer outcomes? And if not, where do we start and what do we need to change? All right, let's take some questions. So I haven't been keeping up with the chat here. So
I can get the questions for you, Miranda.
Great, thank you.
First question we have, should you prioritize people, product, or processes first when the budget is the biggest concern?
That's a really good question. And of course, as with anything in startups, it depends. So I would say first and foremost, I would never throw people at a problem when I'm budget constrained. I'm going to start with the process. This is just me. I'm going to start with the process. I'm going to understand, what is working, what isn't working, where are our friction points, what can we solve with the current resources we have, and where do we have gaps, and how will we fill those gaps, whether that's through a tool, whether that's through a process change, whether that's through hiring for a skill set that we don't currently have. That depends. But I always start first by mapping out the process.
Awesome. All right. Have you had a chance to see the CS features HubSpot is promising? If HubSpot is your CRM, would you recommend that we consider waiting for HubSpot CS features if we are establishing the CS function?
I haven't seen the CS features yet that HubSpot's promising. I'm very excited to see them though, because I'm a big fan of their CEO. She came from CS and moved from being a CCO to now the CEO of HubSpot. And that's a pretty awesome feat. So I think she probably gets it because of where she came from. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if I would recommend you wait. It depends on where you are in your organization. It depends on if this is a really pressing need and you need it right now. That's a decision that I think you have to make internally. It's a good question, Josh.
Awesome. And in the early stages, how do you justify internally getting a CSP on top of a CRM?
Yeah, in the early stages, so what I tend to do is first build out a bit of a business case on what we will get from the CSP versus the CRM. So for example, where I'm at now, we work on Salesforce, and Salesforce, for all its splendid glory, is not a CS tool. And I went through and showed for this investment, this is exactly what we will get. And that's generally what I do at every organization. But this is also the efficiencies that we're going to be able to gain and the increase of knowledge share across the organization. And there's just so many things that Salesforce is and so many things it isn't. And that's where a customer success platform can help bridge those gaps. So you have to figure out what your budget holder, who gives you the budget in your organization, whether it's your CEO or somebody in finance, figure out what language it is they speak, and build your business case around that language.
And what are the signs to you that you've hit the upper limits of the tech that you currently have in place and that you need to hire?
Well, I kind of laugh because I feel like that happens in waves sometimes. Sometimes you think you've hit the upper limits, and then you go back to your process again and you figure out, yeah, it's actually not a tech issue. It's our process isn't scaling. Yeah, like Erica said, you can stretch it even a little more, right? So I would challenge folks, tech isn't a replacement for humans, right? It augments, it adds, but it's not a replacement for humans. So maybe put those two things in separate buckets. I don't know if that answers it. I I I I think that it can be easy to tie the things together, because they're all coming from similar budgets, but they're two different things. Definitely look and figure out where, if you're feeling friction within your tools, is there something with the process that's broken? Start there. Then I would go to, am I missing any skills in my team to be able to move this forward? If yes, is this something I can train for? Yes, great, do it. If no, what does it look like if I have to hire for this? And does this particular missing skill justify a full-time investment? So
That's great. And a good question just came in from Matt. How do you enable your CS team to evaluate the experience a customer wants? So whether that's white glove service versus the pooled or academy approach.
yeah, I don't know if it's enabling the CS team, Matt, or more of an alignment at the organization level of what we can afford to do and what's needed. So I think it's a two-folded thing where you understand, if you have a customer that's spending $1 million or $2 million a year with you, you're going to probably be more open to providing them with more of a white glove experience if that's what's needed. If you have a customer that's spending 50 grand a year, or let's say even lower, $10,000 a year, that's a little bit harder to justify. So what I would start out by doing is first draw out the experience that a customer has as they're going through your platform, where the friction points are, where the points need intervention. Can the intervention come from technology, or does that intervention need to come from a human? If it needs to come from a human, why does it need to come from a human? And then start going down that path of figuring out where you absolutely need to insert humans into the experience, and where you can use AI or in-app walkthroughs or whatever it may be. And I've seen both ends of the spectrum, to be clear. I was an executive at HelloSign, which was an electronic signature company. We had free users and users that paid us tens of thousands of dollars a month. The company I'm at right now, our customers pay us hundreds of thousands of dollars, upwards of millions of, or over $1.5 million, $2 million a year, right? So I've seen all ends of the spectrum here.
Awesome. I know we're almost at time, so I don't want you to have to rush through any answers. So anything that we didn't get to, we will send to Miranda and get her answers and send through with our recordings that will be on our resource hub. But Miranda, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great, really helpful session. And thank you all to everyone who's attended this session and sessions before. Take care and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you. And everybody, feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. Bye.